The New Orleans Saints needed a big win on the road against the New England Patriots, and they got it. How high should your confidence level be after the win, however? We got that coming up for you. All that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Saints, your live postcast episode, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Don't forget, you can always subscribe and follow for free on YouTube wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. And if you want to keep the conversation going, take part in our exclusive film studies, Q&As, and much more, you can become a Locked On Saints insider by heading over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints today to join a community I would love for you to be a part of. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media. You can find me at Saints News Network, Tuesdays on the Locked On NFL podcast, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Go and check them out today. FanDuel.com/LockedOn is where you want to go. Appreciate everybody for being here for this live episode of Locked On Saints following the New Orleans Saints 34-0 massive shutout of the New England Patriots. On today's episode, we're going to go through a couple of things. There's still some stuff to fix, so we're going to look at all that. I know that's weird to say for a shutout, but hey, the NFL is all about getting better every single day, as Cam Jordan would tell you. So how is it that the New Orleans Saints can do that before next week going up against the Houston Texans? We're going to get into that. We're going to look at two major improvements for this New Orleans Saints team, one on the offensive side, one on the defensive side, and how they were key to the New Orleans Saints victory. But first, the New Orleans Saints get the bounce back that they need on both sides of the ball. I know that a whole bunch of conversation over the course of this week has been about the New Orleans Saints offense. It is, of course, more than that, though. The defense was looking for a big bounce back game after surrendering several, scores to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home in their last matchup. So we saw the big bounce back there as well. But you should feel pretty good about this New Orleans Saints team for now. But as we've talked about over the course of the week, you want to make sure that this isn't just a mirage and that this isn't just one game against a bad team that they won. There's a little bit of a dichotomy here to where you have to pick and choose what it is that you want to look at. So as we stand out here in a breezy, very cold, and you know me, I'm a weakling when it comes to the cold weather here at Foxborough and here at Gillette Stadium. We're taking a look at this New Orleans Saints victory. Appreciate everybody that is here. Pictures clear. We look like, looks like it's on a green screen. I'm seeing it. So I appreciate everybody being here for all of this. Big shout out to WWL TV, Adam Nay for the live. I was a disaster and forgot so many things today that Adam was very, very helpful with. So I appreciate everybody for being here. So look, let's take a look at this New Orleans Saints win, okay? What were the sustainable things that you saw from it? Well, we saw the New Orleans Saints go 3 of 3 in the red zone. That's a place that they have struggled so far this season. That's a massive improvement for them. We also saw them come out firing early on in this game, an aggressive sort of pursuit, or a pursuit for more aggression early on in this game to help set the tone. That was an excellent, sort of confidence builder for them. Alvin Kamara gets a touchdown. That's another big thing because the run game was going. You saw Alvin Kamara, of course, get his 73rd career touchdown. That is now #1 on the all-time touchdown leaders list here in New Orleans, or not here in New Orleans, but for the New Orleans Saints. All massive for the success of this New Orleans Saints offense. Because what we saw from the offensive side is that with the run game being there, force that defensive line to stay true, force those linebackers and that front to react to play action, pulled some of those linebackers down, allowed them to go up over the top. We saw the big catch and run by Kendre Miller, the rookie running back out of TCU, another guy that contributed big time in that run game. But because of his effectiveness in the run game, the play action, bringing those linebackers down, giving Derek Carr the opportunity to be able to hit him on the outlet, and then a big catch and run for a huge yards after catch opportunity for him. So those are all massive moments, and it all got established by what the New Orleans Saints were able to do, starting with the foundation of football, the run game, which is something that we've been talking about a bunch for this New Orleans Saints team that they needed to lean in a little bit more on. They did, and they found a lot of success from it. The other thing that I look at and I love this from Crushing the Discussion, who said 6 rushing first downs in particular. Really, really good observation there, because the Saints able to even go to that run game on 3rd and 9, 3rd and 7, and still find ways to be successful there. That's the Alvin Kamara effect. And look, some part of that is a weak New England Patriots defense, but you have to be good against the bad defenses. You have to be able to do that. So the Saints establishing a little bit of the rhythm that we've been talking about, or as we call it, the rhythm, when it comes to what we were looking at for an improvement from this Saints offense. The other thing that you have to sort of tip your hat to, if you will, when it comes to the Saints offense was the offensive line. 2 sacks in this game, one of which was Carr holding on to the ball, trying to wait for something to come out, to come open and everything, and it ended up being a 3rd down sack. The Saints so far have allowed 17 sacks now on the season, 9 of which have all been on 3rd downs. So in some of those cases, you're getting potentially pushed out of field goal range, things like that. We saw that 2 times in this game, but not nearly as much as we've seen it over the course of the opening 4 games of the season. So massive improvements for this New Orleans Saints offensive line, who had their original starting 5 back going back to the beginning of the season with Trevor Penning, James Hurst, Eric McCoy, Ryan Ramczyk over on that right tackle side, and then of course Cesar Ruiz back as well at right guard. So huge for this New Orleans Saints offensive line, or offense, to have its offensive line cooking, if you will, the way that it was. So those are all huge, massive improvements for this New Orleans Saints offense. Now, should you be confident that this wasn't just a 1-game situation? Why would you be confident that it is? Well, that's part of what Cam Jordan addressed in his post-game press conference, where he mentioned, look, got the big 34-0 shutout, the largest home shutout in Patriots history, the largest home shutout loss in Patriots history. Can they show up and do it, or can they travel to Houston next weekend and do it again, right? It doesn't have to be a shutout next weekend, but can they produce? Can they be the defense that they want to be? Can they be the offense that they want to be? They need to now show the consistency from game to game. We saw the consistency in this game. I know toward the second half, things slowed down a little bit. 24 first half points, 34 in terms of the final score. I get all that, and again, 7 of those actually came from Tyrann Mathieu, of course, on the big pick 6. So all of that was great to see. But even though you saw that second half sort of slow down, that became a little bit about controlling the ball, controlling the lead, trusting your defense, all of those things. I don't really mind that. The biggest thing is this team got off to a really fast start. This team got off to a big-time first half lead, which we haven't seen them be productive in the first half all season thus far, except for that Green Bay game. Then they weren't able to hold it up in the second half. They did in this matchup, which is absolutely huge for them and should be good for your confidence when you look at this New Orleans Saints team. Now, you want them to prove it again. You want to see them do it again. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But hey, seeing them do it at all is a massive win for what you're looking for from this New Orleans Saints team. Now, you have to kind of brings me back to training camp in a way, right? We saw the New Orleans Saints offensive line good some days, the defensive line better other days. Which one was the truth? Which one is this New Orleans Saints team? You kind of have to ask that same question about New Orleans versus New England, right? Was New Orleans really good, or was New England really bad? And the thing that you can always kind of point back to is that, hey, what they did against this defense, they did against a Bill Belichick-led defense. Regardless of who the positional players are, regardless of who the personnel is, regardless of who's on the field, it's still a Bill Belichick-coached, highly disciplined, very, very well-disguised led defense, and the New Orleans Saints were still able to come out and show you something. I'm not saying that they fixed all the problems. I'm not saying that they're the perfect offense all of a sudden, but they showed you something that you've been waiting to see from this New Orleans Saints offense all season long thus far, a whopping 4 games before this one. But the biggest takeaway that I would have around all of this is that it's a good start for the New Orleans Saints offense, and it was a great bounce back for the New Orleans Saints defense, who kept points off the board and even put points on the board themselves. Next, we're going to take a look at 2 major improvements, one on each side of the ball, that led the way as keys to victory for this New Orleans Saints team beyond the run game, as we mentioned. So let's get to that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook and the place that you should be going. Hey, look, the New Orleans Saints and New England Patriots did hit the under just like we thought, but the New Orleans Saints almost hit the over all by themselves, a 39.5 point over-under going into this game. The New Orleans Saints getting 34. So if you took the under, though, you're happy. You got a win for your New Orleans Saints, and you got a win for hitting that under, and maybe you took some of that money home. And let me help you take some more of that money home as well. If you're a first-time user of FanDuel, you put $5 down, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Doesn't matter if your bet hits, if your bet misses, does not make a difference. $200 in bonus bets coming your way, win or lose. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, now is absolutely the time to get it done. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon as you get started here with the NFL season underway. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, family, continuing on here today on the field at Gillette Stadium here in Foxborough, Massachusetts. Thank you very much for being here and for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Whether you're catching the show live or you're catching it later, you know I love you, and I really, really appreciate it. And you want to know how much I love you? I am freezing right now, and I'm so happy to be out here talking about this New Orleans Saints 34-0 shutout victory, the largest home shutout loss, for the New England Patriots in their team's history. This is a massive statement win for the New Orleans Saints, regardless of how bad the New England Patriots are. This is a game that they needed to win. And you want to see this New Orleans Saints team, who is notorious, right? Everyone will tell you, oh, they're so good at losing games to the teams that they shouldn't lose to and losing the games that they should win. This is a game that, by all intents and purposes, just talent on the roster, pound for pound, the New Orleans Saints should have won. And what did they do? They came out here and they won this game. And there's two big things that I think that they did that are massive improvements on the offensive side, one on the offensive side, one on the defensive side, that I really loved seeing in this one. I'm getting the sniffles, y'all, because it's cold. I told y'all I'm not playing out here. So let's start with the New Orleans Saints offense, right? We talked about the run game being a big, massive improvement for the Saints. This was their largest team effort in rushing yards so far this season, and that ended up turning into all the things that we discussed before, how play action impacted the offensive line, probably took a little bit of the pressure off of Derek Carr as well, opened up some of those things. You can feel the space, Michael Thomas said, because of that. But here's the other thing that I really, really like that the New Orleans Saints did that I loved. We saw the implementation of motion. We saw the advantage of play action, all of that. But the thing that I really love that the New Orleans Saints did in this game is that they attacked the middle of the field. To almost, I don't want to say to a fault, but Michael Thomas took a shot and he got right back up, went off the field for a second, came back out. You could see the toughness of this team through its wide receivers. Chris Olave was out here working on something with his right foot, as was reported by New Orleans.football and Nick and Brooke and all these fantastic folks that are doing great work. We saw all of that pregame, and Chris Olave comes out and still gets underway, right? So you can see the toughness of this wide receiver room, not necessarily leading the way or setting the tone, but certainly making a statement for this New Orleans Saints team. And for them to be able to attack the middle of the field the way that they did in this game, after not doing it at all for the most part throughout this season, that was massive for them, really, really important for them. And look, you saw a big 26-yard catch right over the middle between Derek Carr and Michael Thomas on a 3rd and 11. You didn't see many of those 3rd and 4 50-yard bombs or anything like that. You saw this team be a lot more selective, a lot more in terms of its risk, a lot more calculated, which is kind of what we expected from this team early on in the season. So great to see that from them. I think their ability to attack the middle of the field opened up a little bit more space on the perimeter for them, opened up a little bit more in terms of the run game as well, keeping some folks out of the box. And honestly, the Saints, even in a moment where they were loaded, the defense, the Patriots had loaded the box, they still found ways to run the ball. So the Saints really dominated the middle of the field, and I think that was really, really important for them and their success, a good measure of success for this team as well. Going over to the defensive side, the thing that I'll mention, somebody said my AC bill will be lower once it's cold. I'm looking forward to that for you, because the AC bills and the energy bills right now in New Orleans are wild. But the other thing that I want to look at in terms of a massive improvement over on the defensive side is that it was actually an adjustment that the Saints made. The Saints did not settle on the defensive side a single time in this game. Let me take you all the way back to the 1-minute drill, if you will, for the New Orleans Saints and the New England Patriots, who were driving downfield toward the end of the first half. I really wanted to see how the Saints defense and Dennis Allen dealt with that, right? Do you play soft, keep things ahead of you? We've seen the Saints do that a couple times this year. It's something that bit them quite a bit in that in that Carolina Panthers game toward the end when they gave up the touchdown toward the end. It bit them a couple times in that that Green Bay Packers game as well. So I want to explain something that I saw in this game. The New Orleans Saints defense started off playing its corners about 5 to 7 yards off of receivers. And in doing that, gave up a few big plays, not big plays, but a few considerable plays, right? Allowed the New England Patriots to move the ball. On those three plays where they were playing off coverage, 14-yard completion, 15-yard completion, and then a defensive pass interference penalty that resulted in an additional 12 yards for the New England Patriots offense. Okay, after that, the next three plays, the Saints put those DBs right up on the line of scrimmage. Got them right into those wide receivers' faces. What happened? 8-yard sack, right? That was by both Tano Passanio as well as Cam Jordan. 4-yard completion, and then a 13-yard sack on third down by Carl Granderson, who had himself a game in this one. And so that, to me, was a good statement made by Dennis Allen, by this New Orleans Saints defense as well, that they weren't going to just play for the half, that they weren't going to just sit back and say, all right, take what you need, take what you want, whatever, doesn't matter, we're going into halftime with the lead, anything like that. No, instead, what they did was that they played off a little bit, but then when they saw the New England Patriots start to build a little bit of a rhythm on their offensive side, they said, no, we're not having that. 2 sacks on that drive to wrap it up, to push them out of field goal range, all of that. That, to me, was a really nice statement by this New Orleans Saints defense, who also held the New England Patriots to 1 of 14 on third down. Situational wins for the New Orleans Saints. Red zone on offense, third down on defense. New England Patriots didn't really get any opportunities in the red zone in this one, so we can't really track those. But when you look at a guy like Carl Granderson, who had a sack in this game, had 3 tackles for a loss, also had a couple of hits on the quarterback. You saw Tyrann Mathieu, of course, with the pick 6, which is massive. Those defensive scores are huge for any team that's able to pull those off and tend to be really, really important in a final game score. And that kind of set off everything for this New Orleans Saints team. The Saints going 5 of 15 on their side when it came to third down, so they were converting, and some of those with the run game. There's a lot to take away from this game that you should be proud of, or that you should be encouraged by when it comes to the way that this game went. Looking at red zone, the Patriots never even took a single snap in the red zone in this game. That's how good the New Orleans Saints defense was. So you got to see the defense get back to what it is that you've expected from it, that you have seen from it in its past. You've got all that, and then you got the New Orleans Saints offense showing you that they can rebound and that they can get the job done over on their side. Now, can they carry it over? All right. Oh, yes, thank you. I'm really him, says in the chat here, that 71% you told us about came to life. So what they're referencing in this is that the New England Patriots, in case you didn't catch any of the episodes from last week, the New England Patriots on 71% of their drives this season have had those drives end in either a turnover or a punt. And we knew that was going to give, if that was going to end up being the case for this, in this situation, that would then give the New Orleans Saints a lot of opportunities to get their offensive rhythm going. Basically almost every single one of their drives in this game ended up cashing in as a punt or an interception. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of their drives all cashed in as either a punt or a turnover. Then you can add in 2 turnovers on downs as well, including their last drive of the game. So you could call it, another 2 more than that. So I think that was a huge piece for this New Orleans Saints offense to get its rhythm, because of the New England Patriots' inability to get rhythm over on their offensive side. We also never saw the New England Patriots start better than their own 35, and that was only once. Several times they started behind in terms of flipping the field, right? Starting field position of 25 yards or worse. That's massive too in terms of the New Orleans Saints' defensive ability to keep these guys pushed back. They're having to rev up over and over and over again. So really, really, really good stuff from this New Orleans Saints defense and offense. But those are 2 big keys for me that I really enjoyed seeing from this team, and that I think are sustainable pieces of evidence, or rather, sorry, let me say it this way, evidence of sustainable ability to be able to put together something that lasts here in New Orleans. All right, coming up next, let's take a look at how the New Orleans Saints can continue to get better. Consistency, penalties, those need to be the next two things. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. I thought maybe the New Orleans Saints might need to visit LinkedIn to see if they could, maybe find another play caller and all that. But Pete gave me the big shut up this week, so that's really, really good to see. The Saints won't have to take to that, but maybe the New England Patriots might be using LinkedIn for some pretty big positions, including starting quarterback going into next season. You want to check out LinkedIn as well, especially if you operate a small business. Small business owners voted LinkedIn #1 in giving over qualified candidates versus some of those other competitors out there. So make sure you go and check them out today. LinkedIn is going to help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. A humongous win for the New Orleans Saints, but still some things to clean up. We can't give them all the flowers right away. This team wants to continue to improve each and every day. Let's talk about how they can do it even after a 34-0 shutout. Now, let me be clear that when I'm doing this, what I'm not trying to do is diminish the accomplishment of a 34-0 shutout. That is far from my goal. This New Orleans Saints team, I think, proves something out here. Certainly shut me up a little bit, but we'll see if the consistency continues through. But every team is always going to be looking for more ways to improve. We did this after the 38-3 victory against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We did it after the 38-3 victory against the Green Bay Packers. Now let's do it again after a 34-0 victory against the New England Patriots. Appreciate everybody for being here, whether you're here live or you're here later, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. So last year we saw the New Orleans Saints top 30 points two times, right? And we saw them, the last time that they topped 21 points was in their win against the Atlanta Falcons. So it's been a little bit for both of these things to happen. So kudos to the New Orleans Saints. 10 games since the last time that they scored 20 points. Did that in the first half. Sorry, let me not give too much credit. First half in this one. And then it was the first time since that Week 7 loss against the Arizona Cardinals on Thursday Night Football, since they scored 30 points. And they came out here and topped that and won the game, which they couldn't do last time. So what I want to look at here is the consistency, game to game consistency. Can you now keep this up? Doesn't mean they have to go out there and score 34 points every single week. Doesn't mean that they have to go out there and shut out opponents every single week. Would that be nice? Sure. Any NFL team would love that. But this is the NFL. That's not going to happen. So when you look at where the New Orleans Saints found success, it was the run game. It was utilizing the eye candy. It was the play action part of the game. It was attacking the middle of the field. It was getting the tight ends involved in the game. Foster Moreau with his first touchdown as a New Orleans Saint. Tyrann Mathieu, another Louisiana guy, first touchdown as a New Orleans Saint. So all of those things, which are sustainable pieces of the offense, are we going to see them be consistent week to week? The reason why I bring this up is because, bear with me, but I want to take you back to last season for just a moment. I promise, just a moment. We don't have to stay there. We can come back to reality very, very quickly. But going back to last year, when we saw Taysom Hill have these fantastic games, right? We always kind of went, okay, they figured it out. They got it. Like, you're going to see Taysom Hill a little bit more involved in everything that's going on for this team, all of that. And then the next game, he wouldn't get any carries, or he wouldn't get any touches, or he was barely seeing the field, or they took an entire half to get him involved and things like that. Those were questions of consistency for me and for many of us, right? For you as well. So now what we're hoping to see is that the New Orleans Saints come out here and learn a couple things about themselves that carry over into the next week, as opposed to seeing a drop off or a lull and then this kind of like up and down roller coaster of offense, like we kind of saw individual elements of, or like we saw with individual elements of their offense last year. Now, can Pete Carmichael, can the New Orleans Saints, can Derek Carr make this and turn this into a consistent level of success? Doesn't have to be 34 points every single week, but can they get over 20 points every week? Can they get into the scoring expectations that you would expect from any modern day offense, but especially a modern day offense with the talent that this team has on its roster. That's going to be the next thing that you want to see. That's not something that's an in-game situation. That is something that you want to see on a week-to-week basis. So that's a big thing that I'd love to see here. The other thing are the penalties. What was it, 11 penalties for this team in this game? And 4 of them were false start penalties, one of which was a delay of game. So this is still something that has been a little bit of an issue for the New Orleans Saints over the course of the past couple of years. There's actually 12 penalties, my apologies. So 12 penalties for 86 yards versus 5 penalties for 30 yards. Sometimes that will lose you a game, okay? So you have to get some of that stuff cleaned up. So there's a couple of different things you have to look at when it comes to the penalties. There's the defensive pass interference penalties, which we saw one of in this game. Turned out to not be such a big deal, but we saw in Green Bay 2 back-to-back defensive pass interference penalties give up, hand over 50, 60 yards over the course of those 2 plays. It was 60, 67 yards, I think, over the course of those 2 plays. Can't let that start to become a little bit of a bugaboo for you as you get into the rest of the season. Similarly, on the offensive side, what we saw in this drive or in this game is that oftentimes the false start penalties or the delay of game penalties, whatever they might be, would cause or a holding penalty would cause a stall in the offense, okay? To where those were drives that the Saints didn't get across midfield, didn't get a real drive going, didn't put points on the board, with the exception of the one after it was a field goal drive with Blake Grupe. I knew I was going to do that eventually. I haven't done it all season. I knew I was going to do it eventually. But it was a field goal to where they actually had run 4 plays for -2 net yards because of a penalty and still ended up making the field goal. That's great. But that's not sustainable, that's not consistent, right? So you want to see them clean up some of those things so that they're not stepping on their own toes, shooting themselves in the foot, whatever foot analogy you want to use when it comes to it. So I think that those are some of the things that you want to see. And there are some penalties that you're just going to live with. Like the defensive pass interference penalty, you'll live with that all day. That's fine. Like that one in particular, you'll live with that. The penalty against Marshawn Lattimore for the unnecessary roughness, I disagreed with the call. You have to live with that, right? You kind of have to. And so I know that not all penalties are created equal. I know that not all penalties are, the type of thing that you can look at and go, hey, you gotta, that's going to cost you a game or anything like that. But when you got 12 of them in a game, it could potentially cost you a game. So those are just 2 things you want to see them prove next. Can they be consistent on a game-by-game basis? Can they clean up the penalties so that they don't end up standing in their own way in a game where they otherwise execute at a really, really high level? So those are 2 things that I would love to see. Somebody said here that lots of momentum now, keep it going. That's the biggest thing. That's Carl Pope who said that. I think that that's the next thing for this team. Can you carry the momentum moving forward? You're back on the road again next week. You got 2 wins, 2 losses. Can you rack up another pair of wins? And then you got a quick week, Thursday Night Football against the Jaguars after that. So you got these 3 straight AFC opponents. You're still firmly placed within your division. The Bucs were on a bye. The Falcons won. You're tied now with the Falcons at 3-2 for the second place in the division. You'll happily take that. Houston did not look like the juggernaut that it's looked like over the course of the past 2 weeks when they had that little win streak going. So can you stand on top of that and end up creating something that leads to a lot of momentum and carrying that momentum so that it's not just one game? All right, the sun is going down. I am getting very cold, and I think that we have kind of exhausted the things that we're looking at for this team to improve now moving forward. Just be consistent, clean up the penalties, don't stand in your own way. And this New Orleans Saints team, with all the potential that it has, sky can be the limit for this team. Just got to prove that it is beyond a mirage. Put it together going forward. Really great stuff from the New Orleans Saints, really great stuff from you, and I appreciate everybody for being here, whether you're catching the show live or you're catching it later. I thank you very, very much, and I appreciate all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Coming up later on, tomorrow on Monday, I'm going to do another episode because I want to keep breaking down this win. So what I want to look at overnight here are the penalties, how they ended up impacting this game, and then bring that report to you. So we'll have a Monday evening show for this one, and then we're back into our usual schedule Tuesday and on. So I look forward to bringing that all to you, and I appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi, and if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know the families. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation, I'll holla at you.